The BMW M5, the top sports version of the new generation of the 5 Series, is today on Autogefuehl, your number one resource for in-depth car reviews and your number one community to discuss cars with Thomas. Exterior, interior and the sporty driving performance, acceleration, launch control, handling, different driving modes, because this one here, sacrilege, is all-wheel drive, but optionally then again rear-wheel drive. How that works, and also on the racetrack here today in editorial, but also everyday street driving, will be presented to you in full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go! In general, the all-new generation of the 5 Series is characterized by this even wider double kidney and a transition to the headlights. In the M5, of course, the front is even stronger, lower bumper, stronger, bigger air intakes than the black vertical fins. And here, they don't have this closing mechanism for better wind efficiency, because this engine here always needs the full cooling, so the kidney is always open, and the headlights always come with the full LED technology there. Optional, then you can also get the adaptive LED also for the high beam. And a very interesting light signature as always, so beautiful glasswork here already. And this blue color, wow, I mean really stunning. If you look at it in detail, you see different color nuances. 4 meters 94 or 16 foot 2 is the total length of the BMW M5, only available as a sedan, and has this typical classic, rather conservative sedan shape, but of course a lot of forward moving sporty elements. For example, here the M5 badge. Then standard would be 19-inch rims. Those ones here are the optional 20-inch in the black shade, also bigger brake discs in general. Optionally, you can then go for the ones we have equipped here, the ceramic brakes. They save about 23 kilograms of weight. The question is if you really need that. I would advise against the ceramic brakes if you're not using this car on the racetrack, because the ceramic brakes really need high braking power to stay clean and not start squeaking. Also, you can collect stones quite easily there. The only advantage is, well, besides the weight, and you have not this fading effect on the racetrack, also the rims stay cleaner with the ceramic brakes, because you don't have this typical brake dust we have with normal brake discs. But for normal street use, I would just go with the standard one. Then door handles have a chrome style contrast on the top part. Very interesting shape from the side mirrors here. You can see it in detail then. And the roof CFRP, or then CFK in Germany, so carbon fiber reinforced plastics. You can also see this carbon fiber look at the very top part. This saves some more weight and gives a more sporty racing touch to that. And then finally, a round shape here at the back of the 5-door sedan. Design line on top of the door handles goes all the way through. Then again, you can see the different blue shades of this paint. What do you think about the design? In the rear we can see that there's a small, just a very small wing here, small wing lip, rather conservative how the taillights are designed, and overall pretty classical. And then of course the strong sports element, 4 pipes here for the exhaust, and those ones are real, not fake, and the black diffuser. Overall, the rear is of course strong, but I think overall they managed from design that it is still, let's say, socially acceptable. You can, you don't arouse too much attention from the design. It's not that they would say like, oh, what, over-tuned sports car you are driving. I think they made it, strong but subtle at the same time enough. But of course, the sound will not be subtle at all. And now what's under the bonnet? Ta-da! With a nice engine cover. It's a 4.4 liter V8 bi-turbo, 600 horsepower and 770 newton meters of torque. And the acceleration figures are 3.4 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour or 62 miles an hour, and 11.1 seconds to 200 kilometers an hour or 125 miles per hour. The latter figure is more like the most vehicles would take to 100. So of course, abundance of power we will also test on the racetrack very soon. So this is the huge car key for the 5 Series, a key which is bigger than probably, the hand of your children. And then you can slide it to unlock and can, for example, do some preconditioning for heating and have some more, timer settings, but also range information. And when you have the check at that option, you can also drive the vehicle like this. We have shown you that in the M550i video. Other than that, just open it or use the keyless entry function. There we go. And the inside, you already have the sporty carbon style decor elements right there. And we also have a bright interior, which is really fitting to the blue exterior, giving it a great contrast. Of course, you can also leave it with the dark interior. Special M steering wheel, which is really asymmetric. The top part is wider than the lower part. It feels a little bit weird, but it still drives very well. And you have those red extra hotkeys, M1 and M2. Those ones can be programmed for your driving habits because there's so much to control, and maybe you at some point find your personal settings you like best for certain situations. Then you can put those ones to the hotkeys. The seats are the special M Sport seats with a lot of side support, especially in the upper areas. They hold you relatively tight. The thing is, only animal skin is available for the M5, whereas in the M5 50i, for example, you can also get an M package with fabric and Alcantara mix. BMW explicitly decided only to offer animal skin right here. I'm not sure if that's the right decision, because even letting the ethical aspect aside, you slide on this one here so much around, especially when you're on the racetrack. And I've tested it once with same vehicles, with the, with this surface and then with a stickier one, and it's really like with this one here, you get hammered, your knees and stuff. You're not really held tight by the surface. So I think for a sporty vehicle, they should also offer then Alcantara choices. At the moment, you have to go over BMW individual also to get a stickier choice than for the seat, but not from Works. Other than that, the seat form is, although it's sporty, very comfortable. In general, the BMW 5 Series is basically, a comfort being, I would say so, because you sit down and immediately relax. Of course, you can adjust it in all the ways electronically. Even the front part of the seat you can lengthen if you have a little longer legs. Then you also have electric lumbar support, and here you can also change the side bolsters, for example, if you want to have things a little bit tighter or not. There's one storage space, a small one in the very front. And the steering wheel can also be adjusted electronically, pretty easy. The build quality is really great in the 5 Series. This was also one of the major things they've changed in the new generation. And headroom-wise, I'm 1.86 m or 6'1", still a lot of headroom left. And by the way, the ceiling they have covered in soft Alcantara to give this racing touch there. And it's also good that they have left the dashboard black, because if that would also be bright, would have more reflections from the windscreen. So it's always good to have a dark dashboard upper side. So the interior overview, again, they've worked a lot on that with the new 5 Series. Look at this symmetry, by the way. I think it's a nice design feature. Well, the screen on the one hand looks popped up, but then if you look at the lower part, this one here and here, so this one basically forms one visual unit. Then this carbon fiber style here for the decor elements. Everything is wrapped tightly, also with the surfaces right there. From this perspective, you can also see how asymmetric the steering wheel is, that the upper part is really thick. The climate unit is really interesting. You still have normal climate knobs, but then you have this screen here. And if it's flickering in any way, it's not in real life, by the way. Seat heating can also be controlled there, so this is, well, pretty fancy. Not even sure if it's necessary, but it looks nice. It has been introduced with the 7 Series. Here, by the way, still a normal CD or DVD player. You can also have a lot of buttons right there. Would you still like to have that, or would you say that this one can be left out? By the way, if you wonder about this button right there, this is to activate or deactivate the different assistance systems. Usually, of course, for city driving, it's best to leave them all on for most safety. And soon and more to the digital instruments, and also a detailed shot on the infotainment system. So let's look over to the instruments. They are somewhat 3D and real, this part. Quite neat design, but on the inside it's all digital. Then when you change, for example, the driving modes, you will also see that there. By the way, there's also a rear differential lock available than in the two-wheel drive mode. And you can also see some more modes here, because you can change the throttle input, how sporty you want to have. You can change the adaptive suspension, how comfortable or sporty you want to have it, and also the steering characteristic. So all individually to choose. Is it too much to pick? What do you think? Or would you like to have so many possibilities? Infotainment in detail? Well, after about 15 years, Mercedes and BMW decided that touchscreens are a thing. Wow, amazing. So finally in the 5 Series you can also use it by touch. Still with the normal controls, with the turning and pressing button. But other than that, now also touchscreen is available and you can connect your phone via Bluetooth. That's possible. That's also possible to use the Apple CarPlay function, even wireless. That's special for BMW. Then the GPS, let's take a small look right there. Pretty responsive, really fast in the reaction. I like that. And going back to the main menu is always good with the hotkeys then. And then you have vehicle info. Well, that's and just driving around here for static. We'll soon also test what's the real consumption on normal street driving, of course. And what else? Well, media, radio. That's the overview right there. We can go to the vehicle information, because here we also have the M setup, for example. There you can configure your M hotkeys at the steering wheel. What else is interesting? Well, if you press the ESC button once, then you get to the M dynamic mode. This one is still 4-wheel drive, but you have more possibilities to play around. If you hold the ESC button, then you can turn it off and configure, and that's the real important thing for the racetrack then. 4-wheel drive mode, normal, it's the standard. Then 4-wheel drive sport is the same as I just showed you with the M dynamic mode. So more torque at the rear wheels, less in the front, so you have a little bit more playground. And then the 2-wheel drive mode, that one then is mainly for the racetrack, or if you really want to play around, just all power to the rear wheels. So it is still possible. You can still choose that. The back mirror is almost frameless, not entirely, but I think it looks quite slim and elegant and is wide enough at the same time. Then if we move up, one of my favorite details in the interior is the light design here in the top part, which has those BMW wing design, I would call them that way. So you know that the taillights used to look like that also for a couple of years. What do you think? You can slide this nice cover open. Then you have the inductive charging port for smartphones, or here the key is at the moment charging, also with one USB port. Then adaptive beverage holders with a nice integrated design right there. 12-volt power supply. Then this special M shifting stick. You can go to reverse like this, or to the D mode to the right side, or manual like this. But you can also use the shifting pedals, of course. And the top part here, really strange at the first sight. What is that? Well, this is here to change the shifting speed in 3 levels. On the left side of the gear selector, you have this button for the ESC. Pressing it once, the M dynamic mode, or what would be the 4WD sport mode, and holding it, then you get in the ESC off mode, where you can also go to the 2-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive. Then this is one button basically. Interesting, because when you press here, you have different function than here, here, and here. So no, depending on where your finger is. And this is then what I've showed you in the instruments. Here, for example, for suspension, you know the deal. Then this one here is to activate or deactivate the special exhaust. You see it does collect fingerprints. Here we can activate it if you want it a little bit louder. And then on the opposite side, we have the classic selector for the infotainment system with this classic rattling sound, and press it then to change something. Or you can also write here, for example, for an address, and then have this separate hotkeys for main menu and map and so on. And finally, the armrest, great build quality also. And I have a thing for those armrests that open up in this kind of fashion, and one more USB slot. Now moving to the rear compartment. The door opens wide enough that you can have an easy entry. Let's see how much room we will have, although we have those sport seats. Well, this is the knee room you got. I mean, it's a long car, so sometimes this result we have in way smaller cars. So There is enough room for tall adults here in the rear. Also headroom-wise, like this. However, it's not the best package. There are cars that offer more legroom considering the length, or even if they are shorter. My favorite feature here, by the way, are those seatbelts with the M colors. Isn't that a neat feature? I really love that. There we have it as well. Nice. Then we can fold down the armrests with cup holders. And the whole thing here also works as a ski hatch. You can reach through. Other than that, we have to flip the seats from the trunk. The middle part you can also fold out this head restraint for the third passenger. Well, as this one here has a big middle tunnel, it's not that easy to sit here as a third passenger. And optionally, you can also get here the 4-zone AC, so also control for the rear seats. Some storage space below that. And then I wonder, I mean, they put 2 more 12-volt power supplies down there, but why didn't they put more USB chargers for the rear passengers? And now to the boot area. Electric tailgate. Here we go. Of course, a sedan is always somewhat limited. Here in the side parts you have some smaller storage space, for example, cabin trolley to display how long the trunk actually is, so you can store a lot of stuff still, although of course the opening is somewhat limited. And here in the top part you can release the rear seats, and here then you have to go around to flip those like this. The ski hatch can be flipped separately if you want so. And that's the setup you have here. So you can also load through longer things, or just to show you again, like this up, and then the ski hatch can be done from here as well. Hello. So we will start this driving part with the racetrack this time, later on also street driving. First, let's see what performance this car got. We will start in the normal modes with everything activated, and I can tell you already then the M5 is a real beast. So very natural driving feeling. Look at how smooth the steering wheel reacts to my commands. Also what's happening then on the road. And of course, listen to the sound. 150 kilometers an hour now, 170. So next corner is a left long here on the editorial circuit. Also used to be a Formula 1 circuit in the past. Here we go. Wow. What a handling. And I mean, it's still a relatively heavy car. But of course the great handling makes up for it. And of course the sporty suspension, hardly any tilting at all. That is very well to control. And I mean, this is the thing also, that even in the normal driving mode, which you can just use on the road, it still behaves that sporty that you can use it on a racetrack. Of course, what I'm missing here a little bit is the accelerating out of the corners, as I have the gear select, let's say, a little bit wrong for the racetrack, but I can adjust it. So now let's put the gear select a little bit different. So those 3 different shifting modes we had earlier. Wow, this is really pure traction here in the corner. Now let's shift a little bit differently. And we'll fold straight, 200 kilometers an hour, 125 miles an hour. Slow down just a little bit for the car in front of us. So let's see how the different shifting mode will change our driving experience. So we should be able to turn up the gears now a little bit more. Yes, there we are, 5,000 RPM. That's of course better than for the racetrack. We have this all-wheel drive acceleration and the traction. That's of course better for fast laps, especially if you're not a professional race driver. Yeah, that's better now for the shifting, and we can even put that to the third level. Now the gears are turned up way higher. There we go. 7,000 RPM, and that's the way for the racetrack. So see how much difference that does. Now the brakes, wow, those carbon ceramic brakes, they never change their habits. They always stay strong the same way. Here we go. Now we can accelerate out better. So I think this is already, you know, very good to have this shifting method. And everything else left in place, but we can play around with the settings even more. That's no problem. So let's go into the M dynamic mode. This would be also pretty much equal to the four-wheel drive sport mode. Now we have a little bit more control what we do with our rear wheels, basically. So you would say you have less control if you think about safety. And here you can see, for example, you can slide out the rear just a little bit. And I think this is also then the mode which I can recommend if you want to play around a little bit, but you're not a super professional. 20. Wow, a lot of stones flying around here. Now again, hard on the brakes. I love this chicane here. A lot of G-forces are applied. And you see, sometimes now when I'm at the exit of the corners, I mean, to drive smooth and fast, you would actually not slide the rear out. If you force it, then here with this mode, you can already have some less traction at the rear, and then you have to counter steer just a little bit. You've maybe also seen the launch control earlier. We did it once in the four-wheel drive sport mode, like now. Then we had a little spin at the launch control, and we once did it in the full four-wheel drive mode. And then there was no spin at all. So that's also the difference. And of course those big action shots we showed earlier, and you know the donut on standstill, that was done then with the two-wheel drive mode, because you still have that possibility to go all the way with the two-wheel drive if you are really an expert. However, if you think about 600 horsepower just on the rear axle, you really have to know the stuff you're doing then. Also, we can change some other settings, for example, the suspension into Sport Plus. Then we have even more tilting traction, let's call it that way, so that the suspension is even a little bit stiffer. And we can also not do the automatic shifting, we can also use the shifting pedal seat, go down second gear. So, yep. We do another round. That's all. Safe instructor.
Tempo okay?
Yeah.
Tempo is okay.
So let's go further. Shift ourselves. Plop. And plop. So you can always do that as well. Whoa. What was that? Is it our tire? Is the tire already blown away? So there seems to be a lot of dirt on this racetrack actually. So you can shift down yourself if you like. You know, at some point when you get too high in the RPMs, the car will still shift up. But you can also do it yourself. For example, in the launch control, the car does shift up yourself even if you are in the manual mode. And last but not least, when we hold the DC button, it's of course not too good to do it while driving, than to go to the two-wheel drive mode. To be able to do that while driving is actually also possible that you set this on the hotkeys. Then you're also more in control, of course. So then let's close up with the rear-wheel drive. And now I feel when I accelerate out that the front is a little bit loose, or looser, I would say. Of course, now we have to be careful because 600 horsepower just on the rear axle. Yeah, I feel that the front wheels are a little bit lighter now, that they don't help me accelerating out. Of course, there's still so much power available and a lot of traction here also on the course. A lot of grip on this terrain. More difference makes it, of course, if you really want to play around and not keep the highest speed. For example, this corner here was where we did those power slides earlier. And if you apply too much of the throttle, for example, you feel the rear is getting light, and if I would just turn a little bit more inward and then apply the throttle even more, this car totally breaks out with the rear. And the thing is, really, you have to be careful with it. As long as there's a lot of grip, you don't feel too much difference actually, but you have to be very careful. And I can just stress it again. If you use too much throttle in the two-wheel drive mode, a little bit too much of steering wheel input, it will definitely kick you out, and you really have to know what you're doing. And I think the race trick driving, and also when we did some hooning stuff earlier, really showed why have they had this decision for the normal street driving mode, going for the all-wheel drive, because it's really hard as a non-professional to keep the 600 horsepower under control just with the rear axle. So, normal city driving, and of course still some agile driving, countryside road upcoming here now. And this one will be very relevant for people just purchasing this car for an everyday driver, for example. So the suspension is of course stiffer and sports oriented. As long as you don't have big bumps on the road, it's still fairly comfortable to drive, so they didn't exaggerate it. And this adaptive suspension of course also reacts on the situation, and you can also tune it as we've shown you to a comfort or more sporty level. At the moment I've left everything in automatic first, on the most comfortable part overall. And the only thing when you realize it, when you for example go into some potholes, or when the covers of the sewage system, when you run into them, that hurts a little bit. Yeah, I'm running over them. Bam, maybe also heard it on the microphone now. It's like bam. That's you just have to face that when you want a sporty car. But other than that, the advantage of that is that you have this super agile driving experience in your everyday driving as well. So I think we have to get a U-turn soon. That will also be an interesting solution then. Steering wise, when you start in normal comfort mode, it's also really easy to steer. You don't need too much power, so you can still drive this car very relaxed. If you're also in the normal driving mode, you hardly hear anything from the engine, just cruising, really rather comfortable. On a long-term run, those sport seats, they are really stiff, so they're not that soft as the other normal seats. So they don't offer so much long-term comfort. You have to face that, of course. If you want to take a step back, then for example the M5 G30i would be a solution. Also engine-wise, of course, it already had a lot of power. And this one here, of course, even more. So even in city driving, we can change the different driving modes, see how they changed everything here. First I go on this roundabout, and then it's really so effortless to steer this car here around. It really drives like on rails. Wow. And that is so much fun. That brings you the joy in your everyday driving life. So that's also what this car is mainly about, because you're driving on the racetrack will probably be a little bit less often than just driving, for example, here, or being stuck in traffic and so on. The overview, by the way, is for a big sedan not too bad, as the mirror is quite big. Also the side mirrors, which have this design function, work pretty normally. And to the rear, of course, you know, they have the sedan back, but the visibility also to the sides, due to this rather classic build, is still somewhat okay. So, if we, for example, change the suspension here to Sport or Sport Plus, doesn't make any sense for the city driving, but you do feel that now it's like a pop, 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 pop. And now going to this Suge Systems covers, then you could feel them even harder. But I think the normal comfort suspension is already sporty, and sporty enough definitely for city driving. So now we're getting a little bit more rural. Even if you're in higher gears in comfort mode, as soon as you hit the pedal, it goes forward so smoothly. So it's really like it feels linear. Wow. And so effortless and sovereign again. The pure driving machine for sure in this segment. I really like the E43, by the way. Even better than the E63. I'm not exactly sure driving wise. Well, the M550i was really a very well balanced car. However, those ones here are not so different weight wise. With the E43 and the E63, there's a bigger difference weight wise. So I felt the E43 had a better balance than the E63 actually. So sometimes less is also a little bit more. Here again, I mean, you have some stuff where you can even save weight here, like with ceramic brakes or the carbon fiber roof. But in the driving, you know, it's more about the stiffer suspension setup they have here for the M5. That is the main difference into the 550i. Still, both cars are somewhat similar. So if you don't want to spend so much money, it would be a solution. So now to the real enjoyment, countryside. That is, you know, what I would most enjoy then with this vehicle. Just driving it so smoothly, that's really great stuff. And I mean, so far the all-wheel drive would be useful also when there's, for example, rainy conditions, that you can still keep control of the car, although it has so much power. Then always you can use the shifting pedals, go back and wow, of course shift up, have this plop from the exhaust. You can also, say, save my neighbors here, go a little bit less loud, but still, but then you don't have this plop. Do you hear that maybe? So I go into the exhaust mode once more, and then I go to shift down, shift up. Well, now it's downhill, but then when I shift down it should happen. So you do feel the difference then in the exhaust mode. I got a little bit, just a little bit. Oh, some other guys filming here. It's a really nice road they have. Well, what about the shifting characteristics if you leave it on auto mode? When you use the shifting stick and when you have it in slowest shifting mode. So they reduce speed a little bit. Car shifts down. Now let's apply some throttle. pretty quick to me. But now we go to the quickest shifting mode. See if there's any difference. So reducing speed, no one's behind us, no one's in front. See how the shifting reacts there. Well, that one came pretty late then. So this is then again the sportier characteristic, that the gears are turned up higher all the time. And so, I mean, you could basically drive everything here in third gear. See how the RPMs are turned up. So this then is the basic difference. Of course, when you drive more around like here, it's maybe even a little bit more comfortable to go with level 1. The gears are turned up higher a little bit. You still have always abundance of power. Well, the all-wheel drive, do you feel a big difference then to a normal rear-wheel drive? Well, when we are on dry roads here, most of the power is directed to the rear wheels anyway, so you wouldn't feel a big difference. The big difference really when there's slippery conditions. We can also test this M dynamic mode here on the streets. And you can't feel any difference right there yet. So that is then more on the racetrack or on rainy conditions. See if I shift down. I feel a little bit that the front wheels are pulling just a little bit, but still this car has still the pure M dynamic riding experience. So there was a lot of criticism also for the all-wheel drive decision, but then again, for everyday driving with so much horsepower, I think it's probably a clever decision, and you can still go for the two-wheel drive mode. Let's see if we can feel anything of that when we're on dry roads. Two-wheel drive mode. Look up, by the way, how natural the steering characteristic is. It's not that progressive as some others, but it just feels right in a way. You can have very smooth steering maneuvers. Let's also see if we can have smooth overtaking maneuvers. So we shift down a little bit. That was not even half throttle. Wow, that's really amazing. So I'm in the rear-wheel drive mode now. And let's see if that changes anything. Of course, the thing is, when do you know it, when don't you know it? And, at some point, the front wheels feel a little bit lighter then, I would say so, because now I really have all the thing on the rear. And I've driven the same road, by the way, also with the, let's say, base 5 Series at the very launch 1 year ago. Also, for example, just with a 3-liter diesel. And the main characteristic about this car is that you do not need the M5 to have this sporty driving experience. So, if you would ask me, did I have less fun driving the 3-liter diesel the same road? I would say no, definitely not. On the racetrack you will feel the difference, but street driving, I would easily go also with the 5 Series base model and still have the same amount of fun driving it. And I think that really speaks for the car. So for example, when you take a Mercedes E-Class, there the base models are, especially when you take the air suspensions, really set on the very comfortable turn, very soft and hardly sporty, and then you have a big difference to the AMG models. But the BMW ones, they start already with a sportier setup. Here, of course, on those cobblestones, whoa, that's the part where the base models have a big advantage then, because this is rather uncomfortable in the M model, even if you are in the in the comfort mode. So bear that in mind. You have to love this. Whoa. brakes are, for normal street driving, actually a little overpowered even. I think I told you earlier about those carbon ceramic brakes. The thing is really that you hardly use them in a way they are meant to be used. And that can actually then become a problem. And I think it happened to me 3 times now on driving events that I caught stones in the rims. So somehow between the ceramic brake disc, and it was like all the time. Sometimes when you like go to reverse, turn the wheels a little bit, you can get rid of those. But twice, just a small stone was stuck and the whole brake had to be demounted. So again, I can strongly advise you against picking ceramic brakes as a normal private customer who is not using the car on the racetrack. Rear-wheel drive mode now. Yeah, okay. So you do feel that when you the more you accelerate, then you feel the front wheels become lighter, and of course you have more room to play around with the rear. So you still have the choice. You know, when you drive the car and you feel like more relaxing, being safe, go to the all-wheel drive mode, and then when you say, I want that even better experience, have a lot of room on the road, want it even more agile, then you can always go to the two-wheel drive mode, or as we have shown you on the racetrack. So overall, I think if you think about the most customers that would choose this car, I think it's a wise decision also just for safety. Because when you go for the rear-wheel drive only 6 horsepower and then attack it on wet roads, it might become a little bit dangerous. But then it's good that you always still have the choice. So if you want that really with the rear-wheel drive, you still have the access to it. So for sure, the sportiest version we have here, stiffest setup, you have to bear that in mind, you have to love that. Driving wise, again, I think the main characteristic is not that this one wouldn't be sporty enough. It's really like the base models are already that sporty, that well done. This of course tops it still, but you feel it when driving this car on the road, that it has so much more capability. The car always tells me, come on Thomas, I'm so bored here with those speeds, even if the roads are quite nice, and in some smaller vehicles or less sportier vehicles, those roads would have felt like, oh yeah, I'm doing this great racing. And here's like, I'm with 80 kilometers, very riding road, and I do like this, and then, well, that's the next corner and the next corner, because it's so effortless. Not boring, but totally effortless. And that's of course then the sporty M experience you will also expect then as a customer right here. So we went to the different modes, the shifting experience. I think the level 3 is mainly something then for the racetrack for sure, and you could still drive it in a calm way. I think the stiffer seats, those ones are the ones that remind you most that you are in this M version, because if you leave all the other electronic stuff right in the comfortable place, then you could always sometimes think, I'm in a normal 5 Series. But as soon as you feel the stiffness of the seats, and as soon as you hit the throttle, then it becomes clear again. And that's it from street driving. Tell me what you like better. The close to reality street driving, which is of course in some ways the more important one for you as a customer, for example. And of course, more showing off is always the racetrack part. And now to our conclusion for the BMW M5. Well, what a day. The car is still cooling down behind me after our hot laps on the racetrack. Well, exterior-wise, I think they have not overdone it. It has a sporty stance, still a lot of classic elements for sure, but I think it is in a way that you can still drive it in everyday driving life without, having this huge wing or something like that in the rear. Then the interior with a great build quality. The seats are for long-term comfort, I think, a little bit too stiff. However, they give you more side support than on sporty maneuvers. And of course, for a real sporty ride, they should also use different materials. The offering of room inside, for the everyday driving capabilities. You have enough room for 4 adults in there. No question, also enough room for luggage. But of course, this upper mid-size sedan class is not really famous for the best package. That's also not the main focus of this vehicle. Driving performance, well, I mean, that's just wow, basically. It's so aggressive. It's really a beast, this vehicle. And you have this new all-wheel drive mode, and I think that's actually a good decision if you really experience it as a customer, because in your normal driving situations you won't be able to use drifts and stuff, and then you're a little bit safer than with the all-wheel drive because it has so much power. And I've driven a couple of 100 cars and also on really a lot of racetracks all over the world, and I must say this one here in the pure rear-wheel drive mode was actually one of the hardest to control because it's really a beast. And when I then think about it, maybe some people buy the car that have even less experience. I think this is also the reason why they went for this 4-wheel drive solution, because it can also be very dangerous, this vehicle. You have to bear that in mind. So if you buy one of those vehicles, I can just advise you, take some of the driving instructor lessons, and BMW M also is offering that. They have special programs, and a lot of people are actually using that, and then also use it for meetup and chat, and it's really good experience to have fun both and have another security or safety experience, which then also helps you to drive the car in your everyday life. So I would look forward to your feedback. Are you maybe also a BMW M or especially a BMW M5 customer? Then share your experience in our comments section. Would be really looking forward to that. And if you ask yourself, well, M5 or maybe just a step back for the 550i, then I can also say the 550i, of course you save a lot of money. So the base model 45,000, M550i is about 80,000. This one here 120 base, as we saw it here today, with a lot of extra, 150,000 even. That's of course really expensive. So the better price performance deal is of course the 550i, a little bit complicated. And of course it offers you a little bit more, calmness also in everyday driving life, although abundance of power and just about a second slower to the 100 sprint. So the thoughts about that, because you had those questions earlier today. And of course, now the car is finished with cooling down. I will cool down now myself, and I'll see you at our very next episode. Thank you so much for watching.